Good evening. Thanks for coming. Thank you, Green Business Network, for having us all here today, and thank you, panelists. This is very interesting and fascinating so far. My little role here is to try to put everyone on some keel about what's going on in Congress with the Waxman Markey bill. As Mike was talking about, climate change is just one of a larger picture of sustainability, and the current bill that's out there for everybody to sort of look at and see what people are thinking is the Waxman Markey bill, which I'll walk through a little bit. I know some people have a lot of familiarity with this and some have less, so I'll just go through sort of the highlights of it, and then we'll follow through with the other speakers thereafter. In 2007, the Energy Information Administration reported that there were 6 billion tons of CO2 emitted into the atmosphere from human-caused events. In response to that, and in response to kind of general public concern, the House of Representatives passed the American Clean Energy and Security Act of 2009 on June 26th by a vote of 219 to 212, pretty close. This isn't a final bill. It's going to the Senate's looking at it now. Senate Majority Leader has set September 28th for all committee drafts. And as we walk through this a little bit, you'll see that there's a lot of room for negotiation, debate, and controversy, so the drafts will be as controversial as this bill has been. The bill, from the highest perspective, is to put a cap on greenhouse gases from regulated entities, and those would include carbon dioxide, methane, perfluorocarbons, hydrofluorocarbons, nitrous oxide, and sulfur hexafluoride. And it starts in 2012. The goals: 3% reduction by 2012, 17% cut by 2020, 42% cut by 2030, more than 80% by 2050, which is very ambitious. But we're starting at 6 billion, so I guess that gets us down to a billion or so. On a general sense, the carbon allowances are allocated to regulated industries, and I know some of you are large enough entities that you're probably among the regulated. And the regulation threshold is 25,000 metric tons per year of a CO2 equivalent. Now, the real detail in this is where the bill gets controversial, and the whole structure is up for grabs. It's a cap and trade program, so some number of allowances are allocated to these regulated entities, and then they have to meet those limits, their cap, with those allowances, or they have to get allowances or offsets through other means. And there are other aspects of this bill that we'll talk about shortly as well. But the allocation scheme is amazing. It's a 964-page bill, and this is how it's broken up as of 2014, and even when you read this part, it shifts over the years, and it's pretty hard to keep track of, but the basic concept is 32% goes to the electric distribution companies to keep the rates low, 9% to natural gas companies, 1.6% to heating oil. A key one here is 15% is auctioned, so the government holds 15% and auctions it out. Some to the iron, steel, cement, and paper industries, a little bit to the oil refineries, some to the merchant coal and electricity producers, some to small business refineries, some to the states for investments in efficiency, some to electric vehicles, some to research and development, some to prevent international deforestation, some for worker assistance and job training, and some for agricultural activities for sequestration. Now that's kind of spread across the map, but as the years go on, there are even more clean energy efforts that are funded through this bill. And you might wonder, well, this looks like it's probably pretty expensive, given that the goal is to reduce CO2 and other greenhouse gases by 80% by 2050. But according to the House report on the bill, it actually will earn the government $9 billion, so it will be a $9 billion reduction in the federal budget deficit. And the basis for that calculation is this 15% auctioning that will give the government more in concept than what is spent to comply with the bill, at least from the government's perspective. So what happens to these allowances? 15% is sold on auctions, and what happens to it? There's another list of goals and projects to address climate change in some fashion, offset lower costs for moderate income households. That's the largest segment of these allowance auction. International deforestation, adapt to negative effects of climate change, support research and development of advanced clean energy technologies, help other nations adapt to climate change, go to international clean coal technology development, and help U.S. workers transition away from fossil fuel dependent industries. So this sort of gets to one of Mike's points, which was, you know, in any scheme, there are winners and losers and opportunities and losses, and this bill has so many aspects to it. There are opportunities and losses, you know, abounding. One of the main purposes of the bill, obviously, is to increase energy technologies and energy efficiencies, and over its lifetime, it's estimated at $190 billion. So that's sort of the general structure. There are a couple of specific aspects that are controversial and will be controversial over the course of further bills and further negotiations. One is the concept of offsets. We mentioned that this is a cap and trade program where you get a cap of allowances and you have to meet it, or you have to purchase allowances. There's another way to address these allowance needs, and that is to get something that's called carbon offsets. And the carbon offsets, they're generous in terms of how many are usable, and they involve things like forest projects or other projects designed to reduce the impact of the global warming gases. And the question is, how do you get one approved? And under this bill, the bill sets up an offsets integrity advisory board that will evaluate projects on a project-by-project basis, and either can certify that they're viable for offsets or not. Half the allowable offsets are to be domestic and half international. So the bill has in comparison to other bills that I've seen, this has more of an international impact and exposure than any I've ever seen, probably. One of the other aspects of the bill is it imposes energy efficiency standards for new buildings, for lighting products, commercial furnaces and appliances. It provides financial support for households that can't meet the requirements for the energy standards. So there's obviously a lot of negotiation about, you know, what is an energy efficient standard or not. One of the obvious targeted industries is the coal-fired power plant industry, and it has its own special requirements, which would include, for new coal-fired power plants, they have to install sequestration methods, any that are constructed or built after 2015, and they also require a renewable electricity standard, RES, which requires large utilities to produce an increased percentage of their electricity from renewable sources, which include such things as biomass and hydro, but noticeably absent is nuclear. So in terms of how to deal with this massive, comprehensive $937 billion bill, for an individual company, learn your baseline emissions is good counsel, I think, and Ann's going to talk about that when she's going through her registry information. Think about whether you can market reductions, look for ways to reduce emissions and catalog those. Mike has a lot of experience in trying to find ways to do that. Maybe perform an energy audit to get your baseline figured out. Get involved in legislation if you're a player that's going to be impacted by this, because the bill is still in such a fluid state and the whole legislation is, and of course prepare for increased energy costs. Thank you.